We've talked a little bit about how the MAGA movement is kind of a movement that bases itself around a whole bunch of slogans. I mean, the movement itself is actually based on the Make America Great Again slogan. You've got, oh, we're going to build a wall and Mexico is going to pay for it. You've got no tax on tips. Often it's just a really bite-sized piece of information that they think encapsulates a greater idea or a greater feeling that they might have. But then when you talk to some of these MAGA supporters and you try to drill down on what those slogans are kind of getting at, they often come up short, or they often come up with nothing, and there's been no real thought put into what they are actually supporting. And I think over the last couple of days, this has become very, very apparent with Kristi Noem, who was questioned before Congress. And when you ask her these basic questions about some fundamental or basic concepts about our Constitution, she's got nothing. It's just a whole bunch of talking points that we've heard out of these people for the last few months now. And it is quite shameful that the DHS Secretary doesn't have a bit more complex understanding of how all of these things are supposed to work. So let's go ahead and take a look at Kristi Noem getting pressed on some very basic concepts of our Constitution. Here she is being asked by Lauren Underwood about whether or not everyone deserves due process. If you guys do appreciate my work, please do remember to subscribe.
Do you believe that the Constitution grants everyone in our country the right to due process, including non-citizens?
The administration has the authority to.
Ma'am, I'm looking for a yes or no question. Yes or no. Do you believe the Constitution? Yes, ma'am. Do you,
we have not conducted in
claiming my
any
time,
kind of
Mr. Chairman?
Time is yours.
Okay. Secretary Noem, I'm just looking for a yes or no here. Do you believe the Constitution guarantees due process to everyone in America?
Due process is exactly what this Congress lays out.
Yes or no?
It is,
Okay, ma'am, I'll take that as a no.
On due process
excuse me, I'm trying to ascertain your understanding of the law as it applies to your department, and you as its leader should be able to give us a yes or no answer, because judge after judge has ruled that the law is not being followed.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The judges have come out and said, you guys are not following the law here. And Kristi Noem has no good answer for a yes or no question here. That is unacceptable from somebody who is supposed to be at the top levels of our government. The question is very simple. Does every single person in this country deserve due process? Are they entitled to due process under our Constitution? It is a factual question. The Constitution is very clear that it is all persons, not all citizens. And the Supreme Court has even come out and solidified that fact, saying that yes, every person in this country deserves some form of due process. And it is very alarming that, like I said, the DHS Secretary doesn't seem to know that. Why is that? Why is it that these people are unwilling to acknowledge one of the basic tenets of our free society? It's because these people are in a cult. Here she is being asked by Veronica Escobar about whether due process was followed when deporting citizen children.
I'd like to now focus on U.S. citizens who were deported. In fact, 3 children so far, likely more children. One of those children with cancer who was deported without the medication necessary to address that child's cancer. Again, a U.S. citizen. The lawyers have said that they were not given, the family was not given an opportunity to make plans for the kids. And so they were deported. Essentially, again, U.S. citizens. I have a question about the forms that ICE is supposed to utilize when engaging with parents who have children, the parents who are being deported and the U.S. citizen children. One of those forms is ICE Form 71-078, or the Caregiver Designation at Arrest form. Were any of the individuals who were deported, who had U.S. citizen children deported with them, were they given an opportunity to sign that form?
When these, the specific cases that you're referencing with these children, it was the parents' choice to take their children with them.
Did ICE
Which it is the
follow
policy
through
of the
on the
Trump
policy?
administration to keep families together.
Ma'am, reclaiming my time. I told you at the top of this, ma'am, reclaiming my time. I said that the questions are really simple, yes or no.
Again, this is a yes or no question, but Kristi Noem was off there rambling about, oh, it's the Trump policy to keep families together. Well, that does not even address the question that you were asked. When somebody or an undocumented immigrant is arrested and they have children with them, there are processes that you need to follow to make sure that those children are properly cared for. And I believe the case that they're referring to here is the recent case of Honduras. Was it a few mothers from Honduras had children? Well, the U.S. citizen children just got deported with their mothers because they weren't given the correct due process to make arrangements for their children. That is what is happening under Secretary Noem's leadership right now, which is absolutely unacceptable. But again, she's trying to weasel out of the question because she just has to step in line or fall in line to the MAGA crowd or to Donald Trump. There is no way in hell that even if she wanted to, that she could actually admit that, ooh, maybe we didn't do what we were supposed to here, which is just not how our government is supposed to be functioning. These people need to be held accountable for these wrongdoings. She then goes on to ask whether or not these families were allowed to speak with their lawyers before they were deported.
Are the parents allowed to speak to lawyers before they're deported or to speak to their U.S. citizen spouses before they're deported?
They are given the opportunity.
Okay, so you can guarantee that every one of those parents.
We followed all the normal policies and procedures.
So
and
they were
everything.
allowed to
Every case
talk
was
to a
handled
lawyer? That's a
exactly
yes?
as it is authorized.
Is that a
and laid
yes?
out by-
That's a yes?
Everything was handled
That's-
appropriately and
but
correctly.
did they
in
all
every
get to
single
talk
case
to a
that you've
lawyer?
addressed
Okay, reclaiming
under
my
the
time.
policy.
Again, she's over there trying to filibuster without giving a proper answer to the question. It was very simple. Do these people get to talk to their lawyer before you deport them out of the country? And Kristi Noem could not answer, well, yes, that's the case. She just said, oh, well, everybody gets they get the right process and procedure, and we're doing everything by the book. When we know that is not the case. Reporting has since said that these lawyers have come out and said that they weren't able to confer with their clients before they were just deported out of the country. There was no arrangements made for their children before they were deported out of the country. That is why a judge has come out and said that there was no reasonable due process at all. This is not okay. This is incompetence at the highest levels of our government. And we're talking about violating one of the most fundamental principles of a free society, due process. We've talked about this time and time again on this channel. But if you do not allow the correct legal recourse to address these claims that the government has made against you, well, then nobody has freedom in this country. Because how are you supposed to distinguish whether you're talking to an undocumented immigrant versus an American citizen versus a child citizen? I mean, you can see where this due process thing is important. Everybody has to be entitled to due process. But that is not what this administration is doing. And when they are pressed on it, they fall apart. Because I don't know why. Maybe because they're falling in line behind Donald Trump. Maybe they don't want to admit that they aren't doing the proper procedures according to our due process rights. I don't know what exactly is going on here, but whatever it is unacceptable coming from the United States government. Chris Murphy then goes on to ask about a case or the Mahmoud Khalil case and asking, well, do you have the right to just start deporting permanent legal residents here?
Do you believe that you have the right to detain or deport a legal permanent resident for expressing their political opinion?
I don't make decisions on legal status here in the United States. The Department of State does that. And I would say that as they've gone through an evaluation of who gets a visa, who gets legal status, green cards, they've been evaluating and discussing how that applies.
Well,
to people
I acknowledge
are in
that
this
you don't.
country.
I acknowledge you don't make.
Right.
But if someone is a legal permanent resident of the United States, I'm not talking about an H-1B or a student visa holder. I'm talking about a legal permanent resident. If you are a legal permanent resident, do you have the right to detain or deport that person simply for expressing their political opinion?
The Department of State makes those decisions.
No,
and the
they don't.
Department of Homeland Security.
You make that decision about who you have the right to detain or deport. So you are involved in that? Do you believe the United States Do you believe the law allows?
The Department of Homeland Security under the Trump administration is enforcing the law, following the constitutional rights of folks who are here as citizens, those who are here legally, and those who are here illegally.
So a legal
that
permanent
have
resident
final
is by
removal
definition
orders.
here legally. Do you believe, I mean, I think this is really troubling if you can't answer this simple question. Do you believe that the U.S. government can detain and deport a legal permanent resident for expressing a political opinion that the administration disagrees with?
The determination you're asking for is based on things that you are determining that the Secretary of State has considered and evaluated.
Again, there is no answer there. Again, this is unacceptable. The question is very simple. Does the DHS Secretary have the right to go around and start rounding people up, legal permanent residents, and deporting or detaining them based on their political speech or their First Amendment rights? The clear answer here is no. That would be a blatant violation of our First Amendment. But instead, you got Kristi Noem over here saying, oh, well, the Trump administration is following the law. We're following the Constitution. It's all just a whole bunch of sound bites that don't mean anything. These people are rounding up people who have dissenting political views, people like Mahmoud Khalil, who spoke out against Israel's war against Palestine, and he was deported based on that fact. They didn't provide any evidence that he was linked to any terrorist organizations. They didn't provide any evidence that he committed any crimes. They didn't even allege that he committed any crimes, and they rounded him up and deported him anyway. This is clearly a violation of our Constitution. This would be viewpoint discrimination. You cannot have an executive branch that is just allowed to go around and start rounding people up just because they didn't like that they spoke out against Israel. It's a pretty basic and fundamental concept of our Constitution. And this government, this Trump administration, seems to have no care in the world for whether or not they are following the rule of law or the basic tenets of our Constitution. And I'll go ahead and show you this one last clip where she's asked about the specific case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, which is one that we've covered a lot here on this channel.
I assume you have read the Supreme Court decision in the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
Yes.
That court decision requires the administration to facilitate Kilmar Abrego Garcia's release from El Salvador. Can you describe the steps that you have taken to facilitate this release? And specifically, can you answer as to whether you have reached out to your counterpart in El Salvador to facilitate Mr. Abrego Garcia's release?
Abrego Garcia is a citizen of El Salvador and should never have been in this country and will not be coming back to this country. There is no scenario where Abrego Garcia will be in the United States again. If he were to come back, we would immediately deport him again because he is a terrorist, he's a human smuggler, and he is a wife beater.
You've read the Supreme Court decision. Does the Supreme Court decision not require you to facilitate the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia?
The Trump administration is complying with all court orders and judges' orders.
Does the Supreme Court order require you to facilitate the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia?
Is a
Yes or-
citizen of
yes
El
or no?
Salvador. It is up to the president of the El Salvador to make the decision.
Again, it's back to the talking points. Oh, well, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, he's an illegal alien. He's a terrorist. He's not coming back to this country. But the Trump administration, we're following court orders. We're following the law. That is clearly not the case. The Supreme Court in a 9-0 decision said that the Trump administration needed to facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, yet they have made no attempts to actually do that. And even Trump himself came out and said, well, of course I could get him back if I wanted him, but they don't want him. Which means they are openly defying the Supreme Court. And instead of talking through this like an adult might, instead of going through some complex reasoning as to what is going on here, we have Kristi Noem resorting back to these talking points that Donald Trump lives by. That is all this is. The MAGA movement is an authoritarian movement that wants everybody to believe in their black and white view of how they see the world or the conspiracies that they project onto the world. And that's why it always comes back to these very repeatable talking points that we continue to hear from these assholes day in and day out. Again, it is an embarrassment for the United States government to be acting in this manner. There is no complex thought going on here at all. There's no even complex reasoning for different ways that you might interpret these different things. It's all just very black and white. It's very simple. They do not want to own up to their mistakes, and instead, they want to lie to the American people about these basic concepts of our Constitution. I mean, it is such a sight to behold. I mean, I knew this administration was going to be bad, but maybe I didn't think it was going to be this bad. I didn't maybe think that we were going to be discussing due process rights, which is just one of the fundamental pillars of our free society. I didn't necessarily think that we were going to be talking about rounding people up based on political speech. I don't even know, man. It's just beyond parody at this point. These people are incompetent. They are fascistic individuals who are, getting in line right behind the authoritarian wannabe leader. And this is the kind of shit that we get when they go before Congress. Now, it is my hope that when Democrats take back over the House and the Senate and the executive, and hopefully we do that in 2028, these people need to be held accountable for this bullshit. They are blatantly going against all of the tenets of our Constitution. They are flagrantly violating Supreme Court orders. They are just taking us down one dark path. And if we do not hold these people accountable when we regain power, we might continue to slip down this authoritarian path. So I will leave it there for now, guys. If you guys got anything out of this video, please do remember to smash that like button and subscribe. Maybe share with a friend or two. I'd very much appreciate that. We are trying to build something here on the left that adequately pushes back against all of this fascistic nonsense that we see in the right-wing media ecosystem day in and day out. So if you do like what I do here, please do remember to smash that subscribe button. It is free. And if you guys want to see how Donald Trump's polling is falling off of a cliff now that we have crossed over that first 100-day mark, go ahead and watch that video on the screen now. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on the next one.